Hi everyone, this is Brian Hayes and welcome to episode 33 of the Music Mind podcast. Today my special guest is Hollywood trombone legend Andy Martin. Andy has been a professional musician all of his life. He's played with some of the biggest stars and on some of the biggest movie soundtracks in entertainment history. Please enjoy my conversation with Andy Martin.
Okay.
Hi Andy and welcome to the Music Mind podcast. Great to have you here today, all the way from Los Angeles as my special guest for episode 33 in the series.
Thank you so much, Brian. I really appreciate you having me, and I appreciate the call and looking forward to this.
Now, our audience have just seen and heard a great quartet arrangement of the jazz standard Alone Together. I believe this was Bill Conliff's quartet. But what's your memories of recording that song, playing with that group, playing in that smaller quartet setting?
Oh, I remember Bill calling me up to the bandstand just because their bigger group was playing the gig. Actually, it was at a hotel on the west side of Los Angeles near the airport, and he said, "I'd like to feature one of our band members." And they had all these cameras set up, maybe 4 different cameras set up around the room. And so he said, "What do you want to play, Andy?" And I said, "Why don't we play Alone Together?" And we just we hit it off and running. Bill as well as Paul Krybick and Tom Warrington on bass. Yeah, so really top-notch rhythm section. And yeah, I just remember that we were having a great time playing, and I remember we were all hitting some highlights in our solos, and I really felt that it was a strong performance by all 4 players.
Absolutely. Fantastic sort of empathy between the players. Just
Yeah.
in general, what do you look for when there's so much music you can play, particularly in the jazz idiom? I think that song was written back in 1932, and the most famous first recording was by the legendary clarinetist Artie Shaw. So it's as a song, it's got a deep history. But what do you look for? Say you're in your own small group. How do you pick the songs that you want to play? There's so many to pick from. What grabs your attention as far as material goes?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, I like to play tunes from the Great American Songbook, basically, you know, stuff that has been come through a lot of musicals and different things like that. And I've listened to different versions of different tunes, and I try to maybe put a little different spin on a Great American Songbook jazz standard. And I just find tunes that I like the chord progressions of. And so I think over the years I've probably I'm not a master of a zillion tunes, but I know maybe 150 tunes, I would say, and I could pick from them. Um, and I can fake my way through another 500 tunes, but I know
Yeah.
about 150 well. But yeah, I like tunes that, with a great chord progression, interesting chords, and just anything that catches my ear, I like to do.
So I guess there's a huge tip you've already given our audience there, particularly the younger players who may be watching this, that I guess what you're saying is learn some songs, build a repertoire that you can express yourself on. Is that part of your advice, definitely, to just memorize songs?
Definitely, Brian. Yeah, and I came to a realization a little late myself was when I would learn a tune, I would play with it. I'd be looking at the lead sheet, you know, like let's say I'm playing with a Jamie Aebersold recording or something like that,
Yeah,
and I'm playing along. I'm looking at the lead sheet. Well, then I'm at a jam session, and somebody calls that tune, and I go, "Oh yeah, I know that tune. I've played it 50 times in the last month."
yeah,
Um, but then I realized I hadn't played it without that sheet music right in front of me. So at
yeah.
that moment, I said, "Okay, to learn these tunes, I have to not look at them. I have to just play them, and just get them in my brain." Organically, as opposed to reading something. Because if you read it, you're not really sure if you know it. And so, luckily, I started doing that, and I got to know tunes much better, much quicker. I would learn tunes way faster, just by getting away from the written music as fast as I could.
Great advice. I think that's the forgotten art, I guess, of learning melodies. And as you said, really learning them, internalizing them. Now, the
Yeah.
other thing that really hit me in that Alone Together track and in all of your playing is your sound, your tone. It's beautiful, it's warm, it's expressive. It feels like that you really are singing to your audience. The trombone's an interesting instrument. You know, over here in Australia, I'm on the other side of the world of you, and we're about the same age. My parents, the first music I heard, my parents loved Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. And I
I
think,
do. Yeah.
yeah, me too. And I think I was about 7, and I'm thinking, geez, that's cool. Now I didn't know Herb Alpert was playing trumpet and Bob Edmondson playing trombone or something, but I just loved the quality of the tones, and the recordings was just fantastic. You know, great way to start my interest in music. A couple of years later, probably about 5 years later, here in Australia, and maybe around the world, we got into this hi-fi era. All the music stores were trying to sell top-notch turntables and sound systems and that. And the good thing about that is a lot of records were being imported from the best players. And one of the first records I bought, was Doc Severinsen, was one of the first I got, because, wow, they put the needle on that. That's something pretty special. But
Oh
his
yeah.
mate Herbie Green's records were also available here. I'm just interested. I see you're smiling there, but I don't know that I've ever heard a more beautiful trombone sound than Herbie. Did Herbie Green have any sort of influence on you? I know you're on the other side of the country to where Herbie was.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. He did. I didn't hear his recordings that early though. I was more influenced by Dick Nash and of course the jazz greats Frank Rossellino and Carl Fontana. I kind of was steering in that direction, and then as the years progressed, my sound I think improved over the years by hearing and sitting next to Dick Nash and great lead trombone players Lloyd Olyate. There's a great lead trombone player. Not a lot of people have heard his name, but Charlie Loper is fantastic lead trombone player with a beautiful sound. And so just by playing with these older players, I was able just to absorb how they were producing sound, and I wasn't up to their level yet. And really, I learned from those guys. And then I heard Irby on records, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, yeah, That's the same school as Dick Nash, but just a little different sound, but both just gorgeous, full, rich, resonant tones. And that's what
Yeah.
I always strive to achieve by playing and playing next to my heroes. And I got to do a couple of records with Carl Fontana. And so he was a big hero of mine. He's got a warm sound as well, a different sound than those guys. Everybody had a different sound. Lloyd Olyate had just a gorgeous, big, brassy, round sound. They all did, but they all had their own personality, which was, and I think I've adapted my own personality over the years with my sound as well. Alan Kaplan was a good mentor as well, because he
Yeah.
was somebody I admired growing up, and I've kind of followed him 10 years after him in the business, and a great lead trombone player, fantastic.
What I'm picking up there is imitation without imitating any one player. Is that, if you look back, do you think you learned by hearing something you liked and trying to imitate it to a degree?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
With trombone players, especially, sitting next to those guys, Dick Nash, Charlie Loper, I try to sound like them. And what I noticed when they played first trombone and I'm playing second or third trombone, I would just get enveloped into their sound. And I was sounding like them playing second, and I'm thinking, how's that happening? These guys are making me sound better because
Yeah.
they are so good and their sounds are so pure. And it really, really was something I tried to develop into my own lead play. And once I became a lead trombone player into my career into my late 20s, then I was being asked to play first trombone a lot more. And so then I tried to let me try to sound like Charlie Loper. Let me try to sound like Dick Nash. Let me try to sound like those guys so my section mates can come together with me like they made me come together with them.
Fantastic. Now, you
Yeah.
come from, I believe, a musical family.
Yeah.
Was your dad a music educator or a trumpet player or something? Was he? Tell us a bit about your early years.
Both. Yeah. He was a fantastic trumpet player, jazz trumpet player. He was a music educator his whole life, his whole professional career. He started a family very young. So he got his job in music education. He went to the University of Michigan to get his master's degree. And then he started teaching at the high school level. And then when we moved to Northern California, he was still teaching high school. And then I was 9 years old, we moved to Southern California, and he was teaching at the college level at Cal State Long Beach. And in the meantime, playing gigs on the weekend, playing rehearsals at night. And he gathered me and my two older brothers, and we joined him in some rehearsal bands in the evenings. And so I got to hear my dad a lot, and he would have jam sessions at home. So that's kind of why me and my brothers are musicians, because we heard our dad play, and everybody was admiring his playing as well. And he was having the time of his life, laughing and playing and singing and just having a great time. And we thought, boy, we'd like to be just like our dad. And so that was our main influence for both me and my two older brothers.
So I guess for you and your brothers, there was never any thought of a career other than music. You saw your dad doing it. Did you ever, the normal school thing, the school counsellor doesn't normally recommend, jazz trombone as a career. But was there ever any deviation in your mind from anything other than being a professional musician?
In my mind, there was. I don't know about my brothers, and I wanted to be a baseball player. So I had
Okay.
quite a history of playing baseball when I was a kid. I played all the time, and I played in many different, all the way up until our senior year in high school. And the thing that threw me into music was both my brothers and my father. On top of, I had a really lousy baseball coach in my senior year in high school, and I had a really great band director. And so I just noticed that there was so much more intellect in the music world than the sports world, and just more interesting people. And so when I graduated high school, I just kind of followed my brothers by doing into different bands and doing different things. And I quickly got a job playing at Disneyland after going to college briefly. And so I was working a full-time job at Disneyland when I was 19 years old.
The Dixieland band.
Yes,
Now,
yes.
yeah. Now that was probably new for you. I imagine you weren't much of a Dixieland sort of player as a young guy. No?
No, not at all. Not at all. So I was already diving into bebop and diving into, Clifford Brown and Frank Rossellino, Carl Fontana, those great players, and trying to be like them and copy them, and Hank Mobley, all kinds of sax players and things. I was copying them, going forward with the mainstream bebop jazz. And so then there was an audition at Disneyland for a Dixieland trombonist, and I didn't know about the audition until the night before. It was the last day. Trumpet player called me and said, his name was Larry Marigolano. He called me and said, Andy, why aren't you auditioning for this Dixieland position? And I said, what? He goes, oh, their last day of auditions is tomorrow. So I asked my dad, who do I listen to? How do I get this style together before this audition? And he said, I have a couple of Jack Teagarden records. So listen to Jack Teagarden and you'll get an idea of what maybe you can do. And then so sure enough, I won the audition and I had a full-time job. It was just a really stroke of luck. It was great.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned your brothers. Scott, I think, is the sax player and Stan, the trumpet player.
Correct, yeah.
I'll just, while we're talking, I'll throw up a photo of the three of you together. Now, what is wonderful is, you've got the classic horn line up there. Trumpet, trombone and tenor sax. That's my favourite, all-time favourite horn line. And you're growing up with that. You must have just assumed, that's what everyone does. Everyone plays in a horn section. Now, right. I'm really pleased to see, it looks like you boys still play together. It's still a thing that you do. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Every once in a while we'll get the opportunity. All our careers just went in different directions. So we did have a Martin Brothers band for quite a while. We played maybe a gig once a month, and we'd rehearse a little bit and try to get new material and work in some original material. And we play some things like Brecker Brother charts and some jazz fusion things, Weather Report. And so we were, trying to play the cutting edge stuff of the day in the, 1980 or so, early 80s. And
fantastic. I want to play our audience just a short little clip here, just a 30-second clip of a couple of grabs of the three of you guys playing together, because it's fantastic. The first one is a bebop headline, and the second one's a sort of a funk sort of line. Someone says, you can't get any tighter than D and A, in a horn section. I love that line. Let's have a little bit of a look at the three Martin brothers playing together.
2, 1, 2.
Okay, Andy, fantastic. Now, I imagine as a professional trombone player, in the type of work that you do, you are known as an improviser, but I imagine being an accurate sight reader is a critical part of your toolkit.
That's correct. Very correct. Yes. Yeah. I give a lot of clinics and stuff, and I talk about how I got started and how my career ended up being the way it was. Basically, I got my foot in the door, like you said, Brian, as an improviser. I could improvise at a young age, at a fairly high level, and so I would be in rehearsal bands, big bands, small groups, and that would be my claim to fame at the time. And then I noticed as time went on, guys were sight reading better than me, and especially the one name you mentioned before, Alan Kaplan. I was subbing in a band that he played in, the Orange County Rhythm Machine. So every Monday night they had a gig near my home in Long Beach. But the three tenor trombone players were from the Valley. They lived an hour away, and I lived 5 minutes from their gig. Yeah. So every Monday afternoon, I would sit there by the phone, wait for somebody to call me. And sure enough, the phone would ring early afternoon. Andy, I can't make it tonight. Can you make it to the gig? I said, sure. So I'd show up to the gig, and let's say I was there, Alan was there, and I'd noticed that the charts were fairly difficult. Tom Kubis wrote most of the charts, and they weren't easy. And I'd miss a couple things here and there, and I would get kind of frustrated at myself. But I noticed Alan wasn't missing anything. He was sight reading everything. Every note was sight read perfectly. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking,
Yeah.
what is he doing that I'm not doing? So I
Mm.
really took notice, and so I really decided to, okay, Alan's really nailing it, and I still have a ways to go here. So I decided between tunes, I wouldn't look around the room. I wouldn't do anything but get the next chart up that the leader called. Bob Cassins would say, okay, get up number 472. So I'd get up that chart and I'd look at the intro really fast. I knew I had about 30 seconds or 45 seconds, possibly maybe a minute, to get all the information I could possibly get into my brain in that short period of time. So first thing I'd look at is the key signature, the intro, get that in my brain. I'd look down the chart, see any repeat signs, see any DS signs, coda signs, repeats that had more than two times, and get those all in my brain, so I didn't have to think about it when I got there. I didn't have to look at too many things. I could just look at the notes, and then I'd look at something that had a lot of accidentals in there, a lot of sharps, a lot of flats, and I'd get that into my, in my mind, I'd play it. And so now that the 45 seconds are up, and he'd just call off the chart, 1 2 1 2 3 4, we're off and running. Okay, then I get through the intro perfectly, along with Alan, and I go,
Yep.
oh, great, okay, I got this.
Yeah.
And so I realized sight reading is nothing more than concentration and looking ahead at any trouble spots, and concentrating as much as you possibly can at the task at hand. And so then as soon as that happened, I was fine. As far as sight reading went, I could hang with the big boys.
That's wonderful story. And Alan Kaplan, for fans of the podcast, was my guest in episode 16. A wonderful chap, just so humble, wonderful musician. It's interesting what I'm picking up from talking to you, Andy, is you've spent you're a lifetime learner. You've sat there and you're thinking, I've read music all my life, but suddenly you're sitting beside a guy who was doing it so much better than you. And instead of sort of taking your bat and ball and going home and crying in the corner, you made a decision, well, no, hang on a minute. I've got to lift my game. That's a wonderful trait to have. Final thing on reading music. Do you tend to see it more as a picture when you're looking at it nowadays after all those years of doing it, where you can sort of see, it's like, there's a tree, there's a dog, there's a cat, there's a bull, or because a lot of people spend their life, from what I see, leading a miserable life of, I'm going to ping off one note at a time. There's 48,000 notes I've got to do. That's an exhausting approach, as opposed to looking at it and saying, I can, da-da-da-da-da-da, you can sort of see the flow of it. How do you, I know you've got to hit every one of those notes one at a time, but what are you, when you see that chart for the first time, you've talked about ticking off key signatures and all of that, do you tend to see it as a flow of music, or is it really one note after the next?
It's more of a flow. Yeah, you see a phrase and you kind of, your brain has seen that phrase before, and so you already know what it is. So you can look ahead. You can play that as you're playing that phrase. You can look ahead to the next phrase, and so it's not really something you're thinking about note to note. It's just like you're saying, it's like a picture. Yeah, you're looking at a picture. Oh, I've seen that before. I know exactly what it is. Move on. I can pick out not only the notes but the volume levels, the crescendos, decrescendos, articulations. Pick up all that in one glance and then move on to the next.
You've had a bit of an association over the years with the US Defence Force bands, and I want to play a clip where you're out front of the Airmen of Note doing a great arrangement of a tune called Carl. But what is your association? Have you had a bit of a working relationship with those US military bands over the years?
Yeah, just one by one, they would ask me to come out and be their soloist. The Airmen of Note, the Army Blues, and a few other bands as well, maybe 2 or 3 other bands. And I would go to their base, rehearse with them, do their outdoor concert usually sometimes. And with the Airmen of Note, we did the indoor concert 2 nights in a row. They filmed both nights, and they just picked the better performance. And so, yeah, it's always been a very, very fun thing to do. And I have an admiration of those musicians. They get to play great music all the time.
Yeah.
They get to play with the same players all the time, which can be good or bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
But with those players, those Airmen of Note and Army Blues, we're talking about the best musicians in the
Oh,
armed forces, and
yeah.
so they're fantastic. I just noticed the rhythm sections are great, the brass players are great, the saxophonists
Yeah.
are great. Everything's so easy to play with them because they're top notch professionals, and they get to do that all the time. They get to
Yeah.
play that great music all the time. So in that respect, they have a really great gig, and I felt really honored to be in front of those groups um, and play with them and but as far as a ongoing relationship with them, not really. I did the one-offs with each of those bands, about 4 or 5 bands, I think it was,
Okay.
and it's been a one-time experience.
The Airmen of Note, up the back, you got Brian McDonald just casually sitting there waiting to pop out whatever's in front of him. There's no stress, and you just think that
Yep.
there's
No
some great
stress in his play.
players.
He's
There's some,
amazing. Looks
oh,
like he's sitting on his couch at home, and he's just
exactly.
no stress in his
No,
embouchure, no stress in his
no.
physical being. He's just an amazing
Just
player.
calmly sitting there waiting for whatever pops up. Okay, let's have
Yeah.
a listen to you out front of the Airmen of Note playing Carl. Now, somewhere along the line, you got your foot in the door of the Hollywood recording studios, the film studios. How did that happen? How did you end up sitting in there with the best players in the world, playing for the biggest film producers, the Disneys and whoever?
Yeah, well, it was never a plan of mine. It was never a goal of mine. I just wanted to play music and play jazz and play music at a high level with really great players. And as the years progressed, I started to get opportunities here, opportunities there, and they led to those opportunities. And I felt by the time I got those opportunities, I was ready because I had played on the road with many different acts, Lou Rawls and rock and roll guitar player Joe Walsh and Paul Anka, Poncho Sanchez, and offshoots of his band. I played a little bit with Celia Cruz and Tito Puente, so I had a lot of experience finally in my young 30s, and then by the time I finally landed back at home full time, I was ready. And so when I got the opportunities to record with the big boys, as I want to call them, then I succeeded. I just was able to hang in there and do a good job, and then that led to further work in the studios. And I wasn't really fazed by it. I was intimidated because I wasn't used to seeing a lot of these faces, and I was playing all of a sudden with players that I had on records at home when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And so that was the intimidating part. And the good part about me was I was much shyer when I was young. I didn't speak up much. I just kind of kept my mouth shut and I tried to do the job at hand. And I think that helped me because I wasn't stepping on anybody's toes, as they say And I don't know if that's a phrase you use in
Yeah, no,
Australia.
very familiar with that. And
Yeah,
I think, keeping your mouth shut and listening is a wonderful, wonderful bit of advice, particularly when you're the new kid in town. What about
yeah.
physically playing? So you're doing a lot of live stuff where I imagine it's largely, loud. Did you have to adjust the way you played in that? I'm thinking you're there on a John Williams score. He's not really looking for the hot jazz improvised trombone solo, or maybe there might be a moment when they are. But did you have to readjust aspects of your playing in that environment?
Yes, I think I just learned by observing. I noticed I would just try to blend with whoever I was playing with, and that helped me a lot. And like I said, the improvising got my foot in the door, but the fact of the matter is I could play in tune and I could play in time and I could play with a good sound, and that kept me in the door. That kept me
Yeah,
in the forward motion of the music business. And so I just tried to blend with everybody, and that worked out. And I noticed you didn't necessarily have to play loud to get recorded well.
yeah.
The thing that got recorded the best was just having a pure sound, was having a nice warm sound, and that was more likely to get onto the recording tape in the day, and now the digital tape. But that was more likely to get onto the recording better than playing louder.
On your website, you got a wonderful little video scroll in the center of it that just highlights just a handful of the 350 or so movie soundtracks you've played on. I just want to put a short little collage of some of those clips here for our audience to just realise that you are playing with the big boys. We've got Tom Cruise there with Mission Impossible. We don't get much bigger than Tom. You've got Disney's and all those Pixar movies. But in the background, I want to play a little bit. You've got a gorgeous version of Old Man River from an album I think was called Setting the Standard. And this again highlights the quality of your sound. This is just beautiful tone. And you're not playing 4,000 notes a minute. You're actually playing the melody of Old Man River. So just behind this little video scroll, I want people to hear that and enjoy the movies that you've played on. But listen to your sound, mate. It's fantastic. So, Andy, the life of a session musician, very rarely is your name up in lights at the end of the movie. I think in recent times, the unions and that have fought to at least have the musicians' names there, but I mean, they just go past in half a second. I'm often amused a little bit by thinking that probably the most heard baritone saxophone player in the history of the instrument is not Jerry Mulligan. It's a guy called Terry Harrington, who was Lisa Simpson's saxophone player. And when you think about it, for 20 years, when The Simpsons was just the number one, animator show right around the world, and Lisa was a very popular saxophonist, I often wonder, what, and you've probably got the personality for it. I think it'd take a particular personality. We were talking about Herb Albert a while ago. I read recently where I think it was his percussion player at the time of The Lonely Bull was paid $25 for his part on The Lonely Bull. Now, he wasn't jaded about it, but as we all know, The Lonely Bull became quite an amazing thing for Herb Alpert and the music industry. And I think it's a great thing. You know, it allowed Herb to set up A&M Records and, from all reports, Herb remains a wonderful human being who, has given back enormously to
Yes,
the
yeah.
world. But you've had a bit of this experience. You've played on animated movies, and I think probably the most recent one was Soul, which was. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How much you knew about it at the time, and the end result of you being the trombone voice behind one of those lead animated characters?
Yeah, it's very interesting, Brian. First of all, I knew nothing about it. I was just called, typical thing, you answer an email from our service, which is called The Dateline, and they say, can you make a recording session on this day? And it happened to be at Sunset Sound in Hollywood, and it was just a 3-hour recording session, and I said yes. And so I knew some of the guys that were going to be there, so we showed up. It was a big band session. We played Things Ain't What They Used to Be, and they
Right.
explained to us, okay, this is going to be a middle school band, and it's not supposed to be great. It's supposed to be okay, So we kind of slopped through it. Oh, they said, okay, that's too sloppy, and then we played it better. They go, okay, that's a little too clean. Okay, let's get somewhere in between. So we finally got the version of that they liked, and they said, okay, everybody can go home, and Andy, you stay. And I didn't know the name of the movie. I just knew that it was a motion picture call, and I knew it was maybe for Pixar, I think, right? And so that's all I knew. And so everybody else left the room, and as soon as they left the room, 2 cameramen came in the room with these big cameras, and one was on my right and one was on my left. And they're filming every move I made. They're filming everything I was doing. I'm thinking, what on earth is this? And they didn't tell me.
No.
And so the instructions from the booth was, okay, we need you to improvise some solos, and can you work something on this chord progression? And real simple, and just try to play in the middle register. And it's supposed to be a middle school student, and she's supposed to be a pretty good player. And so I knew that. And then the second solo, once they got the right version of that solo that they liked, and then the second solo is when she's in the stairwell with her music teacher, and she's improved quite a bit at this point. And they said, okay, now you're still a middle school trombonist, so nothing really fast, nothing really high, but improvise something, and kind of end with a low note or something, And so I kind of did that. They got the version that they liked. Meanwhile, these cameramen are filming me the whole time. I still didn't know what it was for. I didn't know it was an animated film. And then I left the session, and I made my, whatever it might have been. I probably made double scale because I played solo. So it was a 3-hour session, double scale. I probably made, $700. So
Yeah.
I got home. A year later, my colleague who was at that session when the big band portion of it, he goes, hey, Andy, did you play in this movie called Soul? It was Alex Isles. And he was a beautiful trombone player, wonderful. My good buddy of mine. He's just a fantastic player, very great classical player, great lead trombone player, great improviser. Anyway, so he calls me and says, hey, Andy, did you play any solos for this movie called Soul? And I said, I don't know. I don't think so. And he says, oh, sure sounds like you. And so then about an hour later, he sent me some MP3 files, and in the email, I opened them up and I played them. Oh, yeah, that's me. Oh, that was that session at Sunset Sound. Okay. So now I know the movie's called Soul, and now I know that's the solos were used for that movie, and it was an animated movie. So, and did you see the movie, Brian?
I haven't seen the whole movie. I've seen extracts of where the things you're talking about. Is wonderful.
Isn't it great?
The accuracy is fantastic. And that's obviously what those cameras were doing, trying to work your slide positions and embouchure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They got all my movements just exactly as a trombonist would play it. So they just put that on her, and they nailed it with all the instruments, the pianist, the bassist, the saxophonist, the drummer. And they really did their homework, and the animators they hit a home run with that. I don't know if that translates to Australia.
No, it does. No, a home run, absolutely. And I highly recommend that people check out that movie, because you've just given the backstory that you didn't even know that it was an animated movie. You had no idea what the hell. Well, you'd be thinking, why are they filming? What's going on? That would feel weird.
I thought it was for archives. I thought it was maybe they're archiving something for a regular movie or some sort. Yeah.
Yeah. Just while we're on that subject of the life of a session musician, now obviously How many years, like, have you been doing that for what, 30 years, 25 years? In the session, in the studios? What sort of time frame have you been doing that?
Well, it was sparse in my 20s. I did like the Bob Hope TV specials, and I did some horn section recording for some groups that were doing some pop records, the Side Effect, the Gap Band, different things like that. And I would be in a horn section, and then I started to really do other session work in my 30s, basically. Then I started to get calls for TV shows and movies, and then I was off and running, and just it was just a stroke of luck, really, Brian. I was just playing with these great players, and I was getting along with them fine, which is probably rule number one. Is just get along with everybody,
Yeah.
and then secondly, take care of business when you're there,
Yep.
and be professional. Show up on time and do everything that's required of a professional. And then everything seemed to work out with my very simplistic approach of showing up on time, being nice to everybody, and playing good. That simple approach got me really far in the music business.
Oh,
It really did.
it certainly worked. I suppose my question is, how locked into that are you? If an opportunity came up, and in your early days you did 2 year tours or even 4 year tours with some of those massive artists, are you at the stage? Well, I guess not so much now, but in the last, say, 15 years, have you been able to do outside work, or have you really had to, keep the book open for potential studio recording?
I'm open-minded to anything that might come along, and in fact, I'm turning down a lot of studio calls now because I'm just struggling a little bit with my playing, and I don't want to sound my next best. I don't want to sound
Yeah.
not as good as I sounded before in front of my colleagues, in front of people. And so, but I would be open to anything that comes along, basically. In fact, Wayne Bergeron and I talked about this, and he says, "Man, wouldn't it be great in this point of our careers if we got called to go on the road for a year or two and just, with some major pop act
Yeah.
and have a good time and make some money and hang out and have fun, And I think that would be fun. I've never really gotten that opportunity. I have gone on the road, and we do road gigs with the Big Phat Band with Gordon Goodwin's group,
Yes.
and different things here and there. But I've never been on a world tour with Sting or something like
No.
that.
No. No. But in other words, what you're saying, and I guess at your stage of the career, you're entering, I don't want to say semi-retirement, but you probably are thinking of playing less, enjoying life more, rather than, you've certainly got the runs on the board. You haven't got to prove anything to anyone. But what you're saying is you're really not chained. A lot of people seem to be in that thing. They're too scared to do anything else, because if that phone rings and they knock back that Sony Pictures session, they'll never get called again. You seem to be at a wonderful spot in life where, well, you're happy to, I suppose, pick and choose what comes your way. Is that a fair statement?
That's true. That's very true. I've in the past, I've even been kind of the same way. If I got called to do a guest solo gig, like let's say I'm working at the University of Arkansas next year, and I have it booked in February or March or something, and then some big movie comes along and that's slotted for those dates. I will stick with my original call, just because, for one, it's satisfying to go do those gigs for me. It's educational for students. It's always fun for me because I get treated like a king, and I get to play a bunch of solos, and it's just fun.
Yeah.
And then plus with the scheduling of big movie dates and movie calls and stuff, a lot of times they change. A lot of times they go,
Okay.
oh, cancel those 2 weeks, move it down the road 3 weeks.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah.
then you're
Mm.
you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, having nothing. So
Yeah.
I usually will stick with whatever I got out of tune, and I'll still work at home. Everything's fine. I'll still get called.
Yes.
So luckily I'm old enough to have that mindset. So
Yeah.
if I was 40, probably
Yeah.
wouldn't have that mindset.
No, good. It's a good place to be.
Yeah.
You touched on music education just a minute ago. I want to go in that direction a little bit. What's been, or what is your current involvement, if any, in music education? You sharing your knowledge with other people.
Uh, Luckily, being in Gordon Goodwin's Big Phat Band, and prior to that, I was doing clinics and concerts with colleges and high schools, and sending them my charts, and we do concerts, and getting to know the young musicians, and explaining to them how my career developed, and to all those educational things. And I still do that a lot. I still do that quite a bit. This year, I probably had done 5 or 6 guest solo things at colleges.
Yeah.
University of North Texas was one. I'm drawing a blank on all the other ones. Um, I was in Wisconsin. I was in Grand Rapids, Michigan, um, and about 3 others. And so I still enjoy doing that, and I enjoy it more now because it takes the pressure off. Playing a studio job didn't used to be pressure for me. It was playing with my friends, having a great time, playing with the best players in the world, and just getting the job done and going home. Well,
Yeah.
now I stress about it a little more than I used to. So
Okay.
now I might turn that job down and try to do more clinics and do more concerts.
More
colleges.
relaxed. Yeah, more relaxed approach. Quite a few years ago, you did an instructional video for Hip Bone Music, the great New York trombone player Michael Davis, wonderful
Yeah.
player. And I've just got a little, 30-second clip here where you're talking about the importance of attack, a clean attack on a wind instrument. In this case, you're talking about the trombone, but I really enjoyed this because I think it applies to any wind instrument. We can often get a little bit saggy baggy in the way we play, and that can have, as you mentioned here, an enormous effect on keeping in time. If your attacks are delayed, well, your rhythm can be delayed. So this is a good example of you in a video instructional environment. Let's just have a quick look at this from Hip Bone Music.
And I think there's keys to being a brass player and playing time that other instruments don't have to worry about, like, for instance, the attack of the note. Sometimes, you can get kind of a fuzzy attack or a double attack or something like that, but if you sit at home and just, like, it took me a while. My attacks weren't great years and years and years ago, and I thought, how can I improve this? And I went and saw Ralph Sauer, and he gave me some good advice, and he just said, okay, just look at a piece of music and just touch on every note. Just touch it, and then touch it. Like, for instance, and just go around the horn and try to get into different registers and still get the same ping of an attack, and that can be the key to playing good time.
Andy, doubling, being a doubler, being able to play more than one instrument at a professional level. Now, in your case, I assume, is it tenor and bass trombone as the obvious double?
Correct. Yes.
Did you play bass trombone initially, or was that something you had to learn to do?
That's something I had to learn to do. I was probably 18, 19 years old, and I noticed the players that were working that I admired, and I wanted to be like Bill Reichenbach, being number one, Alan Kaplan, all those players that were older than me. They were all playing tenor and bass trombone, and sometimes, more brass instruments than that. Like Bill plays great tuba, plays great contrabass trombone, so does Alan. And those are the guys that are doing all the gigs. And so I wanted to be like that. So I was already taking trombone lessons still into my 20s with a teacher named Roy Main. And so every week I would go to him, and one week on tenor trombone, the next week on bass trombone. And every other week was the other instrument. And so I was becoming more comfortable. It took me a few years to get comfortable switching back and forth on the instruments, until one day I put it into my mind. I just thought, okay, why am I worried about the mouthpiece size on the bass trombone and coming back to tenor, and then vice versa? So I thought, okay, I'm just blowing into a piece of plumbing. That's all I'm doing. It doesn't matter what size the mouthpiece is. Doesn't matter what size the bore size of the trombone is. I'm just playing into a pipe. And so when I got that in my mind, all of a sudden I got way better on both instruments. And then the bass trombone helped me with my air supply on tenor. And then the tenor trombone helped me just with my bass trombone playing in general, versatility, getting around the horn, articulating. And then as soon as I could get through the double trigger register down to the pedal register on the bass trombone, I felt, okay, I got this. And what I finally played a show, it was Phantom of the Opera. And the contractor gave me 6 months before the show. He said, are you going to be able to do this? It's only bass trombone. I said, yeah, give me a shot. And so I practiced for 6 months. Didn't seem to get any better. But when I had that bass trombone in front of my colleagues, I got John Lewis and Wayne Bergeron playing trumpets right next to me. And I got these great French horn players. I had to do it. I had to do it and sound like a classical bass trombone player. And that finally got me over the hump as far as, okay, I can do this. I can really do it. So, and then I started working like gangbusters after that. People knew I could play bass trombone, and that was the eye-opener for a lot of people.
So as far as, and you'd probably be aware, you've probably met James Morrison, our wonderful Australian
yeah.
trombone player and trumpet player. Someone asked, yeah, fantastic. And someone asked James, how do you maintain your trumpet embouchure and your trombone embouchure? She said, I don't have a trumpet embouchure or a trombone embouchure. She said, I've just got a flexible embouchure. And I thought, wasn't that interesting? Like, he doesn't see it as one or the other. But his answer, and I'm just interested to ask you, his answer was playing the instruments he wants to play regularly to maintain a flexible embouchure.
To do it at his level, I think it's just beyond human. I don't know. He's a superhuman. He's something else. He really is. And I have a story for you about him, because he was our soloist with the Gordon Goodwin Big Phat Band. We were in Tokyo for, I think, 4 or 5 nights we were there.
Yep.
And so he was our featured soloist. So he came out in front of the band and played solos, and played a couple features. One that Gordon wrote for him on trumpet, and then one he had on body and soul on the trombone. Oh. And so the first day, of course, we rehearsed both the features, and then he came out that night, did the solos. Great. Okay, well, amazing. Well, he left his horns on stage that night after we were done with the concerts.
Yeah.
And then we went to our hotel. We took the bus back the next day to the concert, to the Tokyo Blue Note, and then his horns are still on stage. He hasn't touched them since yesterday. And he's not warming up before the show. He's not touching either instrument. So then we played our 2 numbers, and then Gordon gets on the microphone and says, okay, let's bring up the great James Morrison. Walks up to the stage, picks up his trumpet. He blows the water key, does the valves, make sure they're working. He says, I'm ready. And I'm thinking, what is this?
Yeah.
This is unlike any brass player I've ever witnessed in my life. And then he played the living daylights out of his trumpet feature, landed on a double high C, flawless from start to finish. Then he picks up the trombone, empties the water key, makes sure the slide's working, and goes, I'm ready. Yeah. And I'm thinking, I can't tell you what I was thinking. I was cursing. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
He played this trombone feature on Body and Soul, perfect from start to finish. Lands on a double high B flat, and standing ovation, and then takes off, and he doesn't touch his horns till the next night when he hits the stage. That is something I've never seen of or heard of before or since.
Unbelievable. And people, we get to see that in Australia all the time. We just take it for granted. But I'm absolutely like you. I can't get my mind around it. But someone asked him once, James, how do you do that? Well, why aren't you practicing before the gig? And he said, I've been practicing all afternoon in my mind. And that, you just stop and think, he's been playing the gig in his mind, doesn't need the instrument.
Not human. He's superhuman. Yeah. And he's the nicest man as well. He's just such a sweetheart.
Yeah. Now, the aging brass musician. I think Doc Severinsen proved to the world that you could play the trumpet very well, in his case into his 80s at an amazing level. But not everyone can do it. Some instruments are more friendly as you get older. You know, if you're a guitar player and you haven't got arthritis in your fingers, you can play that. But how are you approaching the reality of life, of getting older as a brass musician? What is your approach to dealing with that?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Brian, and something I'm dealing with big time in the last few years. I'm practicing more now than I ever have in my life, and I'm sounding not as good as I have in the past. And so I try to get, work on a certain part of my playing, try to get that up to snuff. And then this other part of my playing diminishes. And then I try to get that up to snuff. And then this other part of my playing goes down. And then it's like I'm playing that game where you're hitting the weasel, I'm trying to get it. And it's like I'm chasing this thing that I don't know if I can catch up to it. And so it's really difficult. Like when the pandemic hit, that really, really affected me as far as, I didn't have any work for a bit. Then I was recording at home. I was still trying to keep my chops up practicing, but there's nothing to practice for sometimes. There's no gigs in the future. There's nothing to look forward to. So that really, really hit me hard. And then now I'm just going through, I've had some dystonia things happening in the last 5 years or so. And so I'm taking a lot of lessons to recover those. I'm taking lessons with Jan Kagarais to try to recover my chops, to recover what I had before that I don't have now. So it's an ongoing struggle for me. It's a big struggle for me. So I never expected this to happen. It was like very unexpected. And I just figured I'd coast into my retirement and I'd still be playing great and everything would be great. But now that I'm not playing as well as I want to play, it's and my wife tells me, people don't notice. People don't notice. And I think, well, I'm going, well, my colleagues sure notice, and so.
Do you think some of it is a mental game where you're over analysing what you're doing, or not?
I think it's a bit of both. I think I am struggling with the physical thing, and I am struggling with the mental thing as well. Confidence being the main word of the mental thing, because I never struggled with being confident in what I could play.
Yeah.
Now I'm not confident in what I can play. So that really makes me struggle more with the things going on with my physicality with the chops, So it's a bit of both.
It's a challenge. And your friend Wayne Bergeron is a classic example. I mean, Wayne's in recent years fought cancer, and then I understand he had a dentist who hit a nerve that, a critical nerve for his lip. So he sort of says he's had to relearn how to play the trumpet twice in the last, I think, 5 years. And you hear Wayne play, and you hear you play and you hear Wayne play. I think your wife's onto something. You guys play at such a high standard, but I mean, you've got that memory of a higher standard that you could in the past do. Do you think it's a good idea for any single note instrumentalist to take up a chordal instrument, if only for the purpose of understanding harmony? I mean, you've got great ears. How did you learn, for example, that's a C sharp diminished seventh chord, I can hear that, where on your instrument you can only play the notes of the chord. You can't ever, other than in the section, you don't ever get to hear what a C sharp diminished seventh chord sounds like. How did you learn that one? You've got that wonderful set of ears. Did you learn any chordal instrument or not?
No, I didn't. I wish I learned the piano. I really wish. I started to take piano lessons when I was 8 years old, and then our family moved to Southern California from Northern California, and then we stopped the piano lessons and never started them back up just because we were so busy with the move and new situations and new schools and all that stuff. I wish I played piano, but when I learned harmony, I just learned by listening, and luckily I got that job at Disneyland, because that was a big stroke of luck for me, because I knew bebop, I knew chords, I knew how to get through chord progressions and stuff, and I was 18, 19 years old, and I was already on my way. But when I got to the job at Disneyland, I didn't know any of the tunes. I knew Oh When the Saints, and I knew Mason Street Blues, and I knew maybe two others, So then all of a sudden I'm thrown into the fire on getting paid to
Muskrat Ramble or something that you might have heard it, but you've never actually delved into it. Yeah.
Exactly. So now I'm on the job. So what I did was I just would listen to the tuba note real fast. I'd listen to the banjo chord and go, okay, I got four choices here. I got, a major chord, I got a minor chord, I got a diminished chord, and maybe a seven chord.
Yeah.
Major sevens only come in maybe one or two tunes,
Yeah.
So I can just choose one of those four chords really fast. And so then I also was learning that's the same bridge as this bebop tune on this Dixieland tune. So whoever wrote the bebop tune stole it from the Dixieland tune. Okay, so this A section's just like this bebop tune, except for this one chord's different. So I just started learning like that, and so I was listening to music constantly too. So I just got it, and then by having that job, I learned how to listen. It taught me how to listen to the rhythm section and what is it they're playing, and how am I relating to that. And so it was a great thing for my playing, because my ears got way faster. And so,
it's worked. But I suppose what you're saying, if you had your time over again, you would have liked to have kept those piano lessons to the point where you could. I think that's the big limitation for us on single note. I grew up as a guitar player, so when you said major seventh chord, I can hear it just in my head, and I know you can hear it, but I can hear it because I actually had to learn how to play that. How do you play a G major seventh chord? And I often say to the people that I teach, whether it's a ukulele or anything that can hit four notes. I mean, you can play all the advanced chords on a ukulele. You can play a B minor 7 flat 5 on a ukulele. So people say to me, I can't afford it. I think, $30 for a ukulele? You reckon you can't afford something to hear those chords,
learn how to play chords and learn, different voicings and stuff. And it's because it's an endless world of voicings when you have that instrument, like guitar or piano in front of you. You have an endless world of choices.
Yes. Yeah. So just getting back to my question, diversify or specialize? You know, you're starting out, you're not where you are in your career, but you're wanting to make a go as a professional musician. That's your goal. You know, do you try and be the best trombone player in the world, or do you, if you want to play trombone, do you learn bass trombone? Do you have a bit of a go on tuba? If you were starting out again, thinking of today's environment, what advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, be a little more versatile than I was. I just have the trombone and bass trombone at my disposal. Maybe be able to play well enough to play a gig on the piano. You know,
Yep.
play get some chops to where you can play chords behind other soloists, and you can actually play a solo too as well. So I would do that, because that the whole world's right in front of you. You're looking at it. You're looking at the whole thing right there. You know, I would do that. If I had to change anything, I would learn piano. In fact, my wife and I are building a house in Mexico, and I'm going to get a grand piano to put in the music room. So,
Oh,
so I can
fantastic.
just learn. I can just tinkle along. You know,
Yeah.
in my old age, I can just tinker around on the piano and
I
try to
have a
get
lot of
better.
fun,
Yeah.
doing it. Yeah. Now you've spent your life creating a lot of the music that we've all heard. We've all been to the movies, and when I saw that list of movies you've played on, I thought, geez, I've been listening to Andy for the last 35 years. Didn't know that you were in there on those things. But I saw a really interesting interview recently from BBC TV where they were interviewing Sir Paul McCartney only in the last 6 months or so. And they were saying to Paul, artificial intelligence. What did Paul think the potential impact of artificial intelligence might be on the music business? And he said, well, I know someone sent me a MP3 of me apparently singing a Beach Boys song. And he said, when I listened to it, yeah, he said, it does sound like, but he said, I've never sung that song. I don't know the words to that song. I've never sung that Beach Boys song. But it was so close to him. He said, apart from 2 or 3 little things that voice said, there's no, that's not me. And he sort of said that he believes within 12 months' time, the way it's going, he would not have been able to pick that it wasn't him singing a song he never sang. So it's a bit scary. And he said to him that the negative is that when the 4 boys decided that they'd start the Beatles, a big driving force was, well, we might be able to make some money out of this, out of our creativity, because their dads were miners and mechanics, and their other option was follow dad down the mines, you know. But as a little group, they thought, look, if we write our songs and sing them and that, we might be able to make some money and enjoy life from the creativity. And he just point blank said, nowadays with the opportunities for composers being so limited as far as making money goes, he just said, like, the Beatles would never have happened if the thought wasn't there that we could make a living, a good living out of this. I'm just wondering, I mean, you've created those amazing sounds. Are you concerned nowadays? I know I use just a video editor called Filmora, and if I'm just looking for some music behind a little video I'm making, not a music video, I'll just click an AI button. Mate, do you want fast, slow, medium? Do you want orchestra sound? Do you want a hip-hop sound? You know, what style? Within a click of about 3 buttons, I've got a choice of 6 different option soundtracks created artificially. Definitely not the London Philharmonic Orchestra quality, but, you know, good enough to put behind a video of your dog bouncing around chasing a ball. Absolutely. What's your thoughts? You know, as I say, you've largely been part, in many ways, of the soundtrack of many of our lives through really good musicianship, recorded brilliantly, the old way of doing it. What's your thoughts of where this thing called artificial intelligence might be taking the music business?
That question is a deep one, Brian. I'm not sure how to answer it, because I'm pretty much in the dark about AI. I mean, it's like, I know it's getting really, really advanced now, and they're getting faster. The things can learn by their mistakes, and just keep on getting better and better and better and better and better. It's very scary for everybody. I think not just the music business, but all businesses. Because let's say you're mid-management at some firm. And
Yeah.
then it just decides, well, AI can do the job as
Yep.
well as you if it learns from you for a second, and then it learns from the human for a second, and then it gets better at the job because it learns from every mistake and never makes the same mistake twice. So I think it's really scary. I think I'm really glad I had my career in the years I had it. The only times it might have been better had I lived 40 years earlier, and lived
Yeah.
in the time of Tommy Dorsey or something, or
Yeah.
those days. But
Well, it's
yeah,
interesting, isn't it? I always say to people, like say you say an instrument trombone, trombone. I've never heard trombone on the radio. I'm thinking, yeah, but just go back a little bit. Tommy Dorsey, Glenn Miller. The biggest names in the music business were the instrumentalists. That's two trombone players, but Artie Shaw, Benny Goodman, two clarinet players. Harry James. It was an amazing era where great musicianship was valued. And you mentioned you toured with Paul Anka. I just did a little bit of research on Paul Anka. One of his party tricks from an era when you could really make money in the music business was he wrote the theme song to Johnny Carson's Tonight Show. Bum, ba, ba, da, bum, ba. They reported that at the height of the Carson show, he was earning about $800,000 a year, Paul Anka, as the writer, not the arranger or player, the writer of the Tonight Show theme. It's just a different era where music and creativity seem to be valued. You think nowadays you put a track on Spotify and you wait for that 0.003 of a dollar per stream to add up to be enough for someone to send you a payment. Like it's, unless you're going to live to 500 years, you're probably never going to see a payment.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. One thing I've witnessed in the last few weeks is I think there might be an upswing in live music. As far, I lived most of my career in the studios and in a non-live situation where we're maybe overdubbing or we're redoing it or we're doing something else. And now I've done a couple of gigs in the last few weeks where the last 4 nights I worked this thing called Like It Like Spanish Harlem, and it's like it talks about the whole Spanish Harlem in New York scene and the Latin scene and how it developed with Celia Cruz and Tito Puente and what it came, and people like Desi Arnaz and just this whole scene became something out of this era. But I noticed the audience was just eating it up, and we're playing live music and to a narration. There was play a song, narration would happen. Another song, narration would happen. So it was a very educational experience for the audience. So I think there might be an upswing in live music with this AI thing.
I think so. I mean, if you think back to the 80s when the drum machine come in, everyone thought there'll never be another day's work for a drummer, ever, But there's something about seeing a drummer on a drum kit as opposed to seeing someone press start button on a drum machine.
Exactly, Brian. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think you're right. I think I hope there'll be a surge in live performance. Mate, I want to go out with just a little clip of you playing with that fantastic lineup of trumpet, trombone and tenor sax, this time from Gordon Goodwin's Big Phat Band. And we're going to go out with the shout chorus of Caravan, you guys playing live, just I think about a 9-piece band, having fun, reading an intricate, because Gordon Goodwin, as you've pointed out, doesn't mind writing a difficult chart, not just for the hell of it being difficult, but it sounds so good when it's played.
Yeah.
But before we do that, and your friend Wayne Bergeron's on lead trumpet in this little lineup, is there anything you'd like to share with the audience? You've given so much amazing advice. Is there anything you'd like to share with the audience just about music or life in general, or your thoughts on a good way to live your life, I suppose, be it in music or just in general?
Well, I definitely think a good way to live your life is enjoying music, whether you play it or not. That just brings everybody together. It brings togetherness from different cultures. Like, what's the universal language? Music. We can't all speak the same words, but we can all speak the same music as we play it if we want
Absolutely.
to. So that's going to be the great equalizer as far as bringing everybody together in these days that are so controversial and everybody's butting heads and stuff. Is make music a part of your life and keep it a part of your life for your whole life, and you will be a much happier person. And if you can play music, you're all the better. It's great. You can make conversation. Right now I can play a tune with the pianist and we can't even talk to each other, but I can start playing a song and the pianist can play the song with me, and we're like laughing and having a great time. But you can't do that if you don't know music. So I think it's a great togetherness is music. I think that's going to bring everybody together.
Andy, thanks for being a part of this series. It's been wonderful talking to you, and we've got to see and hear you play some incredible music. But I think more importantly, we've got to hear some real honest conversation about, the struggles you're dealing with now, and which everyone, if they are lucky enough to live, to an older age, will struggle with. But you're dealing with it, and you're loving your music as much as ever. Thanks so much, mate, for being part of the journey here.
Thank you, Brian. I really appreciate it, and this was really fun. I had a great time.
We're going out now with Caravan, the Little Phat Band, Andy in the horn section. To end this episode, Andy asked if we could do the jazz standard "There Is No Greater Love" for our collaboration video. Andy's featured on the beautiful tenor trombone playing the lead role, and I'm supporting him on the tenor saxophone.